Okay, let's get into it. When you look at world history, there are a few figures who just loom larger than life.
And Louis XIV is definitely one of them.
Absolutely. We're talking about a king who ruled France for an astonishing 72 years.
72 years. It's a staggering number. I mean, he was born in 1638, and when he died, he'd outlived his own son and his grandson.
It's one of the longest reigns in recorded history, and it's even wilder when you realize he took the throne when he was only 4 years old.
A toddler. So, of course, he wasn't really ruling. His mother, Anne of Austria, and her chief minister, Cardinal Mazarin, were the ones in charge.
And those early years for him were not exactly peaceful.
Far from it. That whole period was rocked by these huge civil conflicts called the Fronde.
And this wasn't just a small protest.
No, these were massive rebellions. They were led by powerful noblemen who were really angry that the crown was trying to take away their power and centralize everything.
That must have been terrifying for a kid. I mean, what did that actually look like for him?
It was chaos. At several points, the young king and his mother had to literally flee Paris in the middle of the night.
Wow.
There was even one incident where rebels broke into the palace and stood right by his bed just to show him they could. He grew up seeing the nobility not as allies, but as a genuine threat to his life.
So that fear, that humiliation, it wasn't just a bad memory.
No, it became the single most important lesson of his life. It convinced him that the only way to have peace and stability was for the king to have total, absolute control.
And to make sure the nobles could never, ever get that powerful again.
Exactly. And that idea became the mission for his entire reign. So today, let's look at how he actually did it, the tools he used to build that absolute power.
Let's start with the core belief then, this idea of absolutism.
Right, it's a political system where the monarch holds all the power, every single bit of it. No sharing with the parliament, no sharing with nobles.
And he backed this up with a very powerful idea.
He did. He leaned heavily on the concept of the divine right of kings.
Okay, so explain that. What's the practical difference between saying, I'm the king and God made me the king?
The difference is everything. If your power just comes from tradition, then people can argue with tradition. But if your authority comes directly from God,
Then who on earth can question you?
exactly. To challenge the king wasn't just treason, it was a sin. It was the ultimate way to shut down any kind of political dissent.
He even had a famous saying for it, right? L'état, c'est moi.
I am the state. He didn't see himself as the head of the government. He was the government. His personal decisions were the law of the land.
And he wasn't just saying it. He put in the hours to back it up.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't an empty boast. He worked relentlessly for hours every single day, meeting with his secretaries, personally approving every law, every tax. He was involved in everything.
So if you're going to claim you're chosen by God, you need an image to match. You need some serious branding.
You do. And this is where he was a genius. He chose the sun as his personal emblem.
Which is how he got the nickname, the Sun King.
Right. And it's such a perfect symbol. The sun is the center of the solar system. It gives life, light, order.
He wanted all of France, the nobles, the economy, the culture, to revolve around him, just like the planets revolve around the sun.
And he put that symbol everywhere. Gold suns on his clothes, on his palaces, on his carriages. It was a constant visual reminder of who was at the center of the universe.
He even performed in ballets, I've heard, dressed as the sun.
He did. He was a very good dancer, and he would perform in these huge court ballets dressed as Apollo, the sun god. It was a performance of power, showing off his grace and his central role in, well, everything.
A spectacle like that needs a stage. And that brings us to maybe his most famous project, the Palace of Versailles.
Versailles wasn't just a palace. It was a tool of control disguised as a building.
And it started because he hated Paris, right? After the Fronde.
He never felt safe there. It was too crowded, too rebellious. So he took this small, simple hunting lodge about 12 miles away and decided to turn it into the center of his government.
The scale of that transformation is just, it's hard to even imagine.
It's immense. Thousands and thousands of workers spent decades building it. They hauled in massive amounts of stone and marble. They dug these enormous gardens and canals. The goal was to just overwhelm anyone who saw it with the sheer wealth and power of France.
You see that in things like the Hall of Mirrors.
Oh, yeah. Lined with 357 mirrors, which were incredibly expensive back then. It was a way of showing off that French manufacturing was the best in the world. Even the fountains were a power move, requiring this huge, complex engineering system to get the water to flow.
But it was more than just showing off. He actually moved the entire government there.
That was the key. All the ministers, all the important offices, everything was moved to Versailles. He could literally look out his window and see the buildings where the work of the state was being done. Total control, all in one place.
Which brings us back to the nobles. He didn't just want to get away from them. He wanted to control them.
And this is probably the most brilliant part of his strategy. He didn't fight them with swords. He controlled them with etiquette.
How did that work?
He invited, or, well, required, the most important, powerful, noble families to come live with him at Versailles for large parts of the year.
And why was that such a masterstroke?
Well, first, it got them away from their homes, where they had their own local power bases.
Right.
They couldn't be off in the countryside raising armies if they were stuck at court.
Okay, that makes sense.
And second, it turned them from political players into social competitors.
Right, the etiquette. This was a whole system of rules.
A weaponized system of rules. Life at court was incredibly expensive. You had to have the latest fashions, you had to host parties, you had to gamble.
Yeah.
Many nobles went into debt just trying to keep up.
And Louis turned his own daily routine into a series of ceremonies.
Exactly. Waking up, getting dressed, eating meals. It was all public performance. And the nobles would fight desperately for tiny little honors in these ceremonies.
Like what? What kind of honors are we talking about?
The honor of, say, holding the king's shirt while he was getting dressed, or just being allowed to stand in the room while he ate his breakfast. These seemingly trivial things became the most sought-after signs of royal favor.
So the most powerful men in France were focused on who got to hand the king his socks.
Precisely. He kept them busy competing over status and fashion, so they had no time or energy left to plot against him or build up real political power. He completely defanged them.
Of course, a palace, an army, all these parties, none of this is cheap. How did he pay for it all?
He needed a constant, massive flow of cash. For that, he hired a financial genius named Jean-Baptiste Colbert.
And Colbert's whole system was based on an economic theory called mercantilism.
Right. And for anyone listening, mercantilism is basically the idea that a country's wealth is measured by how much gold and silver it has. So the goal is to sell as much as you can to other countries and buy as little as possible from them.
Maximize exports, minimize imports.
That's it. So Colbert poured money into French factories to make high-end luxury goods. Things like silk, fine furniture, and especially those mirrors for Versailles.
Things that wealthy people all over Europe would want to buy.
Exactly. Sell them for foreign gold and silver. At the same time, Colbert built new roads and canals to make it easier to transport goods. And he slapped high taxes, or tariffs, on any foreign goods coming into France.
To make sure people bought French products instead.
It was a very successful strategy. Huge amounts of gold and silver did flow into the treasury.
But there's always a but.
There is. As fast as Colbert could bring the money in, Louis was spending it, sometimes even faster. On the palace, on the court, and most of all, on his military.
Let's talk about that army, because that was another huge innovation.
It really was. Before Louis, kings usually hired temporary soldiers for wars and then sent them home. Louis created Europe's first professional standing army.
A force that was always there, always ready.
Paid by the state, loyal only to the king, not some local lord. And it was huge. At its peak, over 300,000 men.
And they were standardized, uniforms, weapons.
Everything. He built fortresses along the borders. This was a modern, organized fighting machine like nothing Europe had ever seen.
And he used it. He fought a lot of wars.
He did. Very costly wars. The goal was always to expand France's territory to what he saw as its natural borders, like the Rhine River.
And what was the result of all that?
France became the undisputed military superpower of the 17th century. It was the most feared nation in Europe. Other countries had to form these huge alliances just to try and stop him.
So he's got military power, economic control, political control. The last piece of the puzzle for him was religious unity.
Right. One king, one law, one faith. That was the idea. Most of France was Catholic, but there was this large Protestant group called the Huguenots.
And they had legal protections for their religion, didn't they?
They did, for almost a century. But Louis saw them as an exception to his absolute control. So in 1685, he revoked those protections.
He just canceled them.
Canceled them. He ordered their churches to be destroyed and told them they had to either become Catholic or leave France.
That's a huge move, and it must have had consequences beyond just religion.
It had massive economic consequences. A lot of the Huguenots were highly skilled craftspeople, merchants, bankers.
So when they left,
Hundreds of thousands of them fled to places like England and the Netherlands and the American colonies, and they took their skills and their money with them. It was a serious brain drain for the French economy. But for Louis, religious unity was more important.
At the same time, he's also pouring money into the arts.
Oh, he was maybe the greatest royal patron of the arts ever. He funded painters, sculptors, playwrights like Molière. He started royal academies for dance, for music, for science.
And since he was paying the bills, the art tended to celebrate him.
Of course, it was all part of building his glorious image. And that cultural power was immense. French became the language of all the educated people in all the royal courts across Europe. If you were important in the 18th century, you spoke French.
We've talked so much about the glory of Versailles, the power, the art, but what was life like for the average person, the 99% of France, during all of this?
It was incredibly harsh. And you have to understand this to get the full picture. The common people, the peasants, they were the ones paying for everything.
The taxes must have been brutal.
Crushing. They paid taxes to fund the wars, to fund the army, to fund the nonstop party of Versailles.
So they were pushed right to the very edge.
To the edge of survival. And when the harvest failed, which they often did, there was no safety net. Famine and disease would sweep through the countryside. People were just too poor to handle any kind of crisis.
And they had no say in any of this.
None. Zero political voice. You just had this immense, unbridgeable gap between the glittering world of the nobles at court and the grinding poverty of the farmers who were paying for it all.
So as we get to the end of his 72-year reign, what's the final verdict? What was his legacy?
Well, he absolutely transformed France, there's no question. He left it a centralized, powerful, culturally dominant nation. Versailles became the model for every other king in Europe.
He achieved his goal of absolute power.
He did. But that power came at a truly unsustainable cost. All the wars, the building, the spending, it created a massive national debt.
A debt that didn't go away when he died.
Exactly. He perfected the system of absolute monarchy, but he also left it with a financial problem that it could never solve. He essentially mortgaged the country's future.
So the very system he built, this unchecked power to tax and spend, became the weakness that would eventually bring it all down.
In the end, Louis XIV showed the world what the absolute peak of royal power looked like. He achieved incredible glory through art and war and architecture. But it was all built on a foundation of debt and poverty that set the stage for the revolutions to come.
Good luck with your studies.